Hey guys, so we are a law firm that specializes in intellectual property and business law. And so we thought today would be a great opportunity to go through and discuss starting a business in 2025, what we're seeing, what's new, what's updated. But look, it's a bigger kind of analysis than just logistically what you need to do to stay legally protected, which we're going to go through and we're going to give you the hit list. Okay. But then beyond that, it goes, well, how do we get you to make money as soon as possible? So we're gonna start with this. I have Josh, Josh is one of our attorneys here. I am the owner, Crystal Delgado. So let's just jump right into it. So in starting a business, the first kind of fun thing that you need to do, which is easy. You got to pick a name. Okay. So when we are typically getting started, we go, what is it that you're trying to do? But what is the brand that you're going to build? What is the name? And some people get stuck on this, okay? And they will kind of just, have too many options and they won't make a decision. So you do have to make a decision, but the name is important because later on we'll also talk to you about on the intellectual property side, getting your trademark. And real quick, Josh, what's a trademark and why do we care about it?
Yeah, great question. A trademark is what's going to protect your brand and your brand name in the
Mhm.
market as consumers understand it. So that's as people recognize your company in public, the trademark is going to give you protection over that.
That's right. And the good news is that you start getting common law trademark protection as soon as you use the name. I've had clients who will be like really nervous and they'll say, Crystal, I don't want to I want to hold it close to my chest. I don't want people to know what I'm doing just yet because I don't want someone to go steal it. And what I say is, well, even if we don't go and register to get a federal trademark and all that good stuff, which we'll talk about later, starting to use it in the marketplace is actually the best thing that you can do because you get what's called a priority claim. So you say, I used it first, no one else gets to use it. So anyway, pick a name, but then here's some practical stuff that you can go and do literally today if you haven't yet, which is go pick the name, but please go and get all the social media handles for every single social media profile you can think of and make sure it's the same name across the board. Even if you don't plan to post on that particular social media platform, it's so important to grab the handle so no one else gets it, but then also make sure it's consistent. So that's number one. Number two, consider going and grabbing the website. Same thing. You don't have to do anything with it just yet, but just make sure it's your name. So take ownership over that. Okay, now let's get a tiny bit more granular. In fact, let me share my screen here. So, Josh, when it comes to, let's say, what type of entity should someone consider setting up? So we want to do a business, and we have typically the question of, well, should we set up an LLC or a corporation? What's the difference between an LLC and a corporation?
Yeah, there are a number of differences between an LLC and a corporation. So an LLC is structured in the members, the people that compose the company are the owners of the LLC. Now, this is at odds with a corporation where you have shareholders, you'll have a board of directors that are making the decisions, as opposed to the members in the LLC. Now, there are a couple different types of corporations. And we usually recommend that people go with an LLC first, just because that gives them the most control over it right away. But also, you're able to switch between these types. If you elect to change to a corporation, that's something that we can help you with.
Yeah, and look, we're not accountants, but we've just done this a long time, so we can at least share that typically just start with an LLC. It's what's called a pass-through, so it's just super easy breezy with taxes, and you just have a lot less like admin stuff you need to do. And then if you start to make like I had one accountant tell me if you're making over $250,000 gross, or your take home after paying your expenses and your salaries is more than 50,000, that's usually when you want to start thinking about maybe an S corporation. The point here is just doing a limited liability company. You typically want to do it in the state that you live, right? That you're doing business in. Okay, so that's number one, meaning set up a real company. And the most important reason why you set up a real company is because there is a liability shield. There's this nice little bubble that goes around you, right? That's a liability shield of the LLC. So just meaning, for example, Josh, how does that relate to like your personal assets if you're the business owner? What happens if you don't have an LLC? And what happens if you do have an LLC?
Yeah, so this is where we get to the worst case scenario. If you don't have this business entity, you're running your business, let's say you're even taking money in, and then someone comes and sues you, or something happens and you're held liable for an accident, whatever is going on. They can come after you personally and they can take money from your personal accounts if you don't have a limited liability entity.
So think of it kind of like the LLC is a separate entity from you. And so whatever is in the company bank account, whatever the company owns, that is what potentially people can go after. And it makes a big difference. It means, if you have an LLC, they're not coming after your personal bank account, your personal house, your personal cars. If we're talking about like $50 to set up one of these companies, and it's different per state, what I'm saying is let's just go ahead and do that as soon as possible. So set up an entity. Now, next, let me share my screen again. All right, you then want to get what's called an EIN. The way I describe it is the EIN is similar to like it's a tax ID for your entity. And the place that it comes up the most is getting a bank account. Now, why does having a bank account for your business matter, Josh?
Oh, there are so many reasons it's important to have a bank account. I mean, just having records of all of the income and the money that you're expending, but also you're going to want to make sure that you have the money held separately from your personal accounts. You have the limited liability entity, and you want to make sure that you're using that to protect the money.
100%. And then if you are watching this right now and you're someone who just set up your LLC, of course, this is something that is very important. You set up the LLC and then you get the EIN. You do that by going to irs.gov. And the good news is that they're going to want your social security number. They're going to want some information about how you set up the LLC, but it's pretty easy to get yourself. So get the EIN, then you can go to the bank. And the bank goes, hey, in order to open up the business account, what's the name of your entity? They look it up to make sure it's a real thing. And then they use the EIN. So that's how you open up the business bank account. To Josh's point, very important, okay, for again, just beyond anything else, affirming if you ever do get sued, having a way to show that you're a real business. Because if you set up a company and then you never get a bank account and you never follow corporate formalities, as we call them, which we're going to talk about, it gives an argument to a lawyer like Josh who's going to come in and be like, I think that this is a shell corporation. I think that this is a bunch of fakery. And those are legal arguments to try and actually still get through to you personally. So that's why we really are like, let's make sure we do this by the book.
Yes, definitely something you want to do to protect yourself and keep your limited liability company protected in the future.
Okay, so in that realm of corporate formalities, there's something called an operating agreement. So if you are the owner of your LLC and it's just you, or let's pretend it's you plus one or more people, whether it's one or more, it doesn't matter. In most states in the United States, operating agreements are becoming more and more required. And even if it's not required in the state that you're in, we still strongly recommend that you get one. I describe an operating agreement as like the rules of the road for your company. How would you describe it?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. It's the internal structure that you set up for how you want the business to run. If you have other members that are co-owners, for example, who's making what decisions, who can do what, and then hiring decisions, how is the money going to be spent? All of this information is stuff you're going to want to include in your operating agreement to make sure that, well, again, you're protected going forward.
100%. So if you don't put something in writing saying what's going to happen on who gets to pay money and expenses, who gets to sign contracts on behalf of the company, what happens if someone needs to get kicked out of the business, right? We have all kinds of situations, let's say with creatives or even musicians and bands, if you are in a band, and there's a whole bunch of you in the band. If you don't have this, really, it's not a partnership agreement, but it kind of is like it, right? If you don't have essentially this agreement talking about what happens, well, that's where all the problems come up. And then you end up spending, honestly, like it's usually 3 to 5 times more trying to just deal with the problem that was created because you didn't just get the operating agreement in the first place. Okay, and then one little pro tip, and it's a question that comes up if you're a business owner, you're hanging tight with us right now, and it comes up often, which is, should I get insurance? So I guess I'll throw that over to you, Josh. Should someone consider getting, let's say, general liability insurance right away if they're a new business owner?
Well, the word I keep using throughout this is protect, and that's what we want to do. So insurance is going to protect you through the operations of your business. You're going to be protecting what you're actually doing through a general commercial liability insurance policy or protecting your customer data from any incidents with a cyber policy. There are all sorts of areas that you're vulnerable in your operations just by how you're running your business that you can protect yourself by getting an insurance policy.
The answer is, as with most lawyers, probably. Depends. So sometimes when I'm talking to clients, I go, look, let's talk about your budget. If we go and get a quote, quotes, love them. If we get a quote and they're like, cool, your insurance policy would be 10 grand, then my questions to you would be, well, are we in operation? When do we plan on actually selling something? How many customers are we going to be selling? So just looking at the potential exposure. So our companies that do, let's say, intellectual property, and so they're dealing in copyrights and trademarks. And so these are a lot higher ticket potential claims. And so we go, you probably really want to rush and like, put a budget to the insurance. And there are other businesses where, if you can protect yourself and just do it, great, love it. But sometimes it doesn't make sense in the business plan to do it just yet. So again, talk to your attorney. Very important. Now, we were discussing this because we are recording this early in the year, and this is the BOI report, the beneficial ownership interest report required by the federal government. Dot, 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 maybe? So what's going on with this report?
Yes, this is a long story that we've been following since the beginning. So, to summarize on this, there was a federal court in Texas that said you don't need to actually submit this information. They put an injunction in place, and then that was appealed by the government. And then they said, actually, you do need to submit this information. But then hold up, because they changed their mind really short after that. And now it seems like we don't need to, but they are not finished with their ruling yet. So we're still waiting on some final information on whether or not we're going to be required to submit this beneficial ownership information to the government.
Yeah, and even the step before that, guys, the reason why this is such a big deal, okay, and that it was required, the federal government put out a mandate and they go, hey, we're giving you a whole bunch of time, business owners, so that if you have an existing business or if you set up a new one, we're telling you what the timeline is to file this, little report with the federal government. It's called FinCEN. And if you don't, they're threatening. They're like, we're going to literally sanction you. We're going to impose fees up to $500 a day, and we might throw you in jail. Like it was pretty harsh. So as we saw these deadlines were coming up, which previously was January 1st of 2025 for most LLC owners, most business owners. So what Josh is talking about is, basically we had different courts being like, we're injunctions trying to stop it. So okay, it may come back around and be a required thing. So again, to the extent you have a lawyer, you can check in on this just to see if it's required for you. Very, very important. And that's why we're mentioning it in this video.
Yes, definitely something to stay aware of.
All right. So look, on our little checklist, we just went through company name, we're setting up an LLC, we're getting an EIN, we're opening the business bank account, we're for sure getting an operating agreement, we are going to consider getting insurance, and we may need to file the BOI report. So now that we kind of have that, let's set it aside. Let's talk about, practically speaking, what are you going to sell? Okay, so, all the administration, all the legal work to kind of set this up, let's conceptualize now, which is a really important piece towards making you money. We are hyper-focused on outcomes and actually helping you to achieve revenue for your business as soon as possible. So where I kind of like to start with this is, well, do you need to rush out and hire 5 people if right now it's just you and you have a small amount of revenue coming in? And what I would say and just really encourage you to do, because I have built businesses, Josh has built businesses, and in fact, we, do this every single day with our clients, is trying to focus on what can you just do for yourself if you have a very limited budget, and to feel empowered that you literally can do every aspect of your business, and you probably need to. Now, the upside of that is that at some point you will be able to hire someone who can come in and do the job, but at least you will know how the job needs to be done. Building a team is something that's going to happen organically. Now, what I would say is that when it comes time to, let's say, hire someone like a website designer, we consider people who you hire to be either contractors or employees. Josh, what would be the difference between a contractor and an employee?
Well, there are a lot of state level regulations and federal government regulations on how you are required to take care of an employee compared to an independent contractor. Now, this is a little bit of a messy area of law, because just saying independent contractor or just saying employee is not enough in a contract to make it actually come through that way. There are specific legal requirements, and for example, who's instructing them? Are they providing their own materials? These are just a couple of the considerations for an independent contractor versus an employee. But ultimately, an employee will have more rights on what they are able to do in the organization.
One, typically where we're going to have you start also is with a contractor agreement, right? Let's say you're hiring someone who's going to do just limited work for you. Great. We're going to 100% say you need to get a contractor agreement and then get it as a template, because then you get to use that template put in new names, put in new amounts. But what you want to make sure is that you have ownership over everything you're paying for because, man, I'm telling you, I've had federal lawsuits where we had copyright infringement claims because a contractor was hired and paid hundreds of thousands of dollars over many, many years, big business. And because things were friendly, there was never an actual contract. And under federal law, copyright law, you have to have an agreement saying who's going to own the intellectual property that's created by this person working for you. So again, the website design, the copy, the pictures, your logo, all this stuff can get missed for business owners early on, and then we have to go fight about who owns it. So having, for example, a contractor agreement for people who are doing limited services for you, very important. To Josh's point, there can be employees, right, that where they are employees according to the law, and we need to do an employment agreement. And it's just if you don't have this stuff in writing, boy, can it get messy.
Yes, there's so many provisions that you need to keep track of with employment law, and that's really where you want to get an attorney's help.
Okay, so then a couple other things that you guys can keep in mind as now you are conceptualizing the business. What are you selling and how are you going to sell? So that's why we said at the very beginning of the video, not just starting the company and getting the name, but equally, are you on social media? Is there a way for people to contact you, to know about your services? Do you have a simple landing page, such as a website? So this really does come full circle now on your brand. And we're so hyper focused on how important that is. And, it's important even for our law firm. We put out videos on YouTube. We do a ton of social media across all social media platforms because that gives you an opportunity of exposure. So consider and make a little list, okay? What sets you apart from your competition? So that's number one. And you want to really highlight those things. And let me just give you an example. For me, as the law firm owner, I didn't know if this would be a good thing, but at the time I started my law firm, the thing that kind of set me apart was the way I looked. I've always been a musician and I had bright red hair. And I was like, well, I'm going to be an attorney and I'm going to run a law firm. And I don't know how that's going to impact me, but I'm kind of like the redhead attorney. And that became very much part of the brand and it ended up being a good thing because it made me relatable to creators and entrepreneurs and all that stuff. So you, as your own business owner, consider those things. Let's also talk about pricing. These are questions that come up, right, from our clients of like, well, where do I start? We think about music stuff a lot, right? If I'm a music producer, how much should I charge? And Josh, I'll ask you this, but where I usually start with this, I go, pick a number and let me tell you what I know because in these industries, I'm familiar with these numbers. So let me give you some numbers, but I go, pick a number and just see if people pay it, right? But Josh, what do you tell our clients when they ask about, pricing?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's a really difficult to figure out what is the market value of your work, especially when there are people that you're building a brand. The people might not know exactly the quality of your work. Let's say you're a producer or something like that. How much do you charge for one day's worth of work? Well, there are a couple different things you're going to think about. What is your time worth? How much can you afford to do for the minimum? At what point are you losing money? You need to keep that in mind because you can't go below that point if you want to run a profitable business. But beyond that, what are people willing to pay? Like Crystal said, there's nothing stopping you from raising it from one client to the next client. There's nothing preventing you from increasing your rates in the future.
And here's the thing, I think a lot of people go, well, what's the market value? What does everyone else charge for this thing? And then I'm just going to charge a little bit less. That's what a lot of people do. And that's not even necessarily the right move because what I found is that sometimes if you go, no, 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 I'm going to charge premium for what I do, my services, my goods, okay? But this goes back to the brand, right? What justifies you charging this certain thing? And it's really up to you to be your own cheerleader and to show these highlights, right? And to build out your website. So really understand how important that is for you when you're going to go hire someone, okay? And it's the same thing when someone's coming to hire you. And then one other thing I wanted to mention is for serving a niche market. People go, well, how wide should I go? A lot of people go, I want to serve everyone. So if everyone needs something, I'm here and I can take as much business as possible. And often what helps is actually niching down. If you serve a narrower target group, that can really help to build something that eventually becomes more wide net. That's my kind of more personal experience. What's your take on that, Josh?
Yeah, I think I can second that experience. People really like to have a community to build on, right? So
Mhm.
if you can get your niche in with other people who are engaged in similar things, then that usually works out to be free marketing for you. Just as a side note, But then also you are building your brand, which is the thing that we keep going towards around that niche, and that's going to take care of you. Those people are going to take care of you.
Okay, and then where I would like to end this, and guys, what I'll say is that this is what we do day and night, and sometimes just even having someone to kind of coach you through it, even if you are able to do some of these steps yourself, like setting up your LLC and all that good stuff. If you ever want to set up a consultation with us, we'll be sure to leave contact information for you to reach out. But where I want to leave this is the number one mistake that I am seeing for those who are setting up a new business in 2025. And Josh, I would ask you to give me your thoughts on this. But for me, the number one mistake that I'm seeing with those starting their businesses in 2025 is hesitation to take action. Okay. So this is the tons of fear, right? Especially if you're doing something brand new. It is so scary. And you're like, if I do this wrong, I'm going to lose my investment. People are going to make fun of me, right? So there's so much fear that goes into it. And in that hesitation, you just delay the inevitable, right? You still have to take these steps. You still have to, as a lot of people say, you have to fail because meaning you have to learn the lessons. Again, from just my personal experiences, my personal businesses, but also my clients, the speed at which you get through all of those things will shorten the time horizon of how quickly you can actually get to profitability, success, great clients. So that would be my take on it. What about you, Josh?
Yeah, if I could just add an analogy to that. Your business is a baby bird. It starts out as an egg, a little idea in your brain. It's not anything yet, but it hatches. It's got to come out of the egg at some point. And then you start making your business plan. You've got all these ideas. What are you going to do? How are you going to make money? Who are you going to be helping? And then you want to fly. And you're not going to know if you can fly until you actually jump out of the nest, until you actually try flapping your wings. You really do need to take that leap of faith. You're believing in yourself, right? And jumping into that to make sure that you can fly. And you might not fly the first time. It might take you a couple jumps, but that's okay. That's part of the process.
I love that. That's great. And it's not even just that, right? It's that knowing that those first couple of jumps, expect them to not go well. If you are a special little unicorn and it does go super great for you right out the gate, amazing. We're so excited for you. You're probably not going to have that happen. And when it doesn't happen, that should not be the excuse to stop. That should be that I learned the lesson from that thing, not going to do that again. And now we're moving on to something bigger and better. So we know you're going to rock it in 2025. If you need help, reach out to Delgado Entertainment Law, and we'll see you on the next one.